Hello, everyone. Tonight, the Alliance of International Aromatherapy Research Academy is excited to welcome Wendy Maddocks again. Tonight, she's presenting Mission Submission, Picking the Right Journal for Publication. Wendy is an experienced registered nurse and academic, researcher, and aromatherapy practitioner. She holds New Zealand's first doctorate where aromatherapy was explored in a clinical setting. Wendy has published widely internationally over the last 30 years. Wendy taught aromatherapy in integrative healthcare and currently works full-time as an academic in health in a university in New Zealand, as well as running a consulting company called Aromatic Adventures. Wendy is on the executive committee of the New Zealand Register of Holistic Aromatherapists, is a fellow of ICANN, the International Clinical Aromatherapy Network, and on the International Scientific Committee for the Gatfase Foundation, and a reviewer for a number of journals. Wendy is passionate about advancing evidence-based aromatherapy. The AIA Research Academy is made possible by a generous grant from the Gatfase Foundation, and welcome, Wendy.
Thank you, Denise, and welcome everyone. Just a slight correction. It's this the second one is the hypothesis hustle, is the talk of the
I'm sorry, I said the
That's
wrong
okay.
one. Hypothesis hustle. All right, I'll let you
Yep.
take it from here.
Yep, that's right. So shall I share my screen now? If I do that one, we tested this before, but hopefully you are all seeing the screen of the presentation. Cool.
Looks perfect.
No, lovely. No, well, yeah, so the hypothesis hustle, how to craft your research hypothesis for aromatherapy research. So it's a real honour again to be presenting the second presentation in the series about aromatherapy research. And in this one, it's really about how to write a sound, academically sound research hypothesis, specifically looking at from an aromatherapy perspective. What is a hypothesis, how it functions in scientific inquiry, and how to craft clear, testable statements to guide rigorous aromatherapy studies. And what does this mean in practice? Now, I know some of the people on screen now and then people listening to this later may all have different experiences about aromatherapy, and maybe some have conducted some research, but I'm hoping that at least everyone has picked up a journal, an academic journal article, and had a read about this. And one of the things we will find is there's not a clear right way of doing things. There's wrong ways. So what I'm wanting to cover today is really understanding the importance of a clear hypothesis. Starting to do research or starting to think about research can be a really, really scary step for new and even experienced researchers. And what this webinar, I hope, will give you is the opportunity to think about taking those initial steps, and we'll explore what a hypothesis is, what's the best methodology to actually answer your hypothesis, and how having a carefully crafted research question will help you keep focused. And just before people logged on, Denise and I were just sort of chatting, and I said quite a few times I've had people say to me, "Oh, why don't the nurses just research that, or why don't midwives do a research study on something?" Without any sort of real understanding of what's actually involved in it. So what I'm going to do here is just present some common research terminology to make sure that we're all using the same terms. And certainly will be time at the end for any questions. And if there's any other terms I use and you're not sure, then absolutely please ask. So what is a hypothesis? These are the terms that we're going to look at, sorry, and go through and answer the questions. So firstly, what is a research hypothesis? What it means, it's a testable prediction about a relationship between two variables. So we've got an example there of comparing aromatherapy makes people feel better. Why does that not sound like a good research hypothesis? It might be a good statement to make at the end of a study, but to start with as a study, it's too vague. We can't measure it. There's no specific intervention. There's no population, like who are people? It's far too broad a term, and there's no comparison group. So who are we comparing people who? Feeling better could mean anything from improved mood, reduced pain, reduced stress, more energy, um, better sleep, or it could be anything else. Like it's just such a vague sort of term. By not being measurable, it means that there's no defined outcome or scale. We're probably all familiar with the pain scale, the 0 to 10 pain scale. Imagine sort of trying to measure someone's pain without a pain scale, which is we used to do many, many years ago in nursing. No specific intervention. What that means is, what is aromatherapy for starters? What's the dose, the duration, the method of giving it? Which aroma is being used? And as I said, no comparison group. So that means if there's not a baseline or control to measure from, how do we know? So I started to sort of have a look around at what other people are saying. And I found this recent 2018 study looking at something called medical aromatherapy, published in a human psychopharmacology journal. And basically, they found that many studies, or their conclusions, that many studies are low methodological quality, conceptually ambiguous. What is aromatherapy? Poor hypotheses stem from unclear definitions of essential oil dosage delivery, exact outcomes being measured. And I suspect, like we are globally, we are moving towards being better in the space, and that's part of the purpose of these workshops as well. This specific article doesn't quote an explicit hypothesis, but it makes it clear that many studies published that they reviewed were really poorly put together, poor framing, and echoing broader concerns in aromatherapy literature that hypotheses often fail to define those essential variables, outcomes, and populations clearly. So some of you might be familiar with these terms, particularly if you've done sort of some quantitative research. So generally, if you're doing a scientific study, we have what's called a null hypothesis or H0, and that's predicting no effect or no relationship between things. And the alternative hypothesis is the prediction of an effect. And an alternative hypothesis can be directional, meaning that the direction of change, predicting the direction of change. So something will get better is one direction, or reducing symptoms is the opposite direction. Or it might be what's called non-directional, which just means that it's predicting that there will be a difference, but it doesn't matter which direction it goes. So I've put a couple of examples there. So a null hypothesis. Lavender aromatherapy has no effect on sleep quality in adults with insomnia. And a directional alternative is that lavender aromatherapy improves sleep quality in adults with insomnia. And a non-directional alternative is lavender aromatherapy affects sleep quality in adults with insomnia. So hopefully we can see just those little subtle differences between a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. So you might put both into your research study, but even we can see on those examples that I've made up there that they don't give us everything that we need to know. So to summarize there, so the null hypothesis always predicts no effect, and the alternative can be directional or non-directional. So the next term that we need to look at is the methodology. And this is really, it's the overarching plan or strategy for your research. This is about how the hypothesis will be answered. Okay. And this is where you decide your research design, whether it's experimental, quasi-experimental, or observational. So experimental means that you have a control group, so an intervention group, so people are receiving the intervention. The control group, they're not receiving the intervention. Quasi-experimental is similar, but there's no control in that. So you just might be comparing an intervention group with what normally happens or what's happened in the past. And then an observational is you're just observing what is happening without necessarily doing an intervention. Methodology determines how the intervention is being applied, who is getting it, who's not getting it, what is the placebo if it's going to be used, and how data collection will occur. So what tools are going to be used? Have you, for example, just made up a tool in your head and you thought, I'm going to try this? Or is it a tried and tested tool that you can trust? Is there going to be some statistical or other sorts of analyses that's being done? And this often gets missed out is the ethical considerations. What are the ethics that I need to consider if I'm going to be doing this study? So, an example is a research methodology example. The title Effects of Lavender Aromatherapy on Stress Reduction in University Students. So, the intervention is lavender aromatherapy, the population is university students, and the thing that we're measuring is stress, and we're wanting it's a directional alternative hypothesis or measuring an alternative hypothesis. The research design that we could choose is a randomized controlled trial, which will be conducted to examine the effect of lavender essential oil inhalation, so it's telling us how it's going to be administered, on perceived stress levels amongst university students. So that's telling us the design, a randomized controlled trial. So some people are going to be inhaling lavender oil and some people won't be. The population is anyone in this age group 18 to 25 enrolled at a university. So that's the whole population. The sample is the number that you pick for do your study on. And an example of sampling method is a convenient sampling followed by a random assignment into two groups. So convenient sampling means that basically you're taking anyone who meets the criteria into your study rather than going out and picking and finding them. You're inviting anyone who's enrolled and they just happen to be there and they meet the criteria. The intervention is that the intervention group, the participants, will inhale lavender angustifolia for 10 minutes in a diffuser in a quiet room. The control group, participants will inhale unscented carrier oil under identical conditions. So they're both getting the same environment that it's been carried out in, but they're inhaling different things. And they're going to have one session a day for 7 consecutive days. The outcome measures perceived stress, so they're self-reporting their stress using a perceived stress score, which is a validated tool. And they're also going to do some secondary outcomes, physiological stress markers, so taking salivary cortisol levels. Then you would go on and talk about the statistical analysis, so an independent test will be used to compare between the groups to see if there's any statistical significance between those groups. Thinking about the ethical considerations, so there's going to be a university ethics committee. There may also be some other sort of ethics committee that would need to be contacted, depending on the country that you're in, and informed consent from all participants, and that the participants can withdraw at any time without penalty. So they're all of the things that come together to form the methodology that you have to think about and plan before you even sort of start. So thinking about your population. So I mentioned before the university students aged 18 to 25 at a particular university. So this is the entire group of people that you're going to draw your sample from. And why do you think this actually matters? From a research point of view, it means that you get clarity about who the results apply to. So if we find that inhaling lavender oil helps reduce stress in a university population, we may not be able to apply those results to an older age population, and vice versa. It helps us work out, how generalizable are our results, and also ethical considerations. Because if you're got people under the age of consent, of legal consent. So, depending on which country, and it might be aged under 18, some countries under 17, New Zealand at 16. So if you've got people under a certain age, they actually can't give informed consent. So, there's a whole nother layer of ethical approvals that you might need to consider. But common populations, if you sort of have a scan of the aromatherapy literature, um, common ones that I've come across: adults with mild anxiety, pregnant women experiencing nausea, post-operative patients in hospital, children with sleep difficulties, and healthcare workers under stress. They seem to be the most common populations that aromatherapy studies are drawn from. So the next thing we need to look at is our variables: independent versus dependent. So hopefully you get my little pun there, essentially. Thinking about essential oils. So the independent variable is the thing that's being added. So for us, aromatherapy, it's the essential oil and the method of delivery: dose, concentration, duration, and frequency. And even that is open to a wide amount of things, because a lot of studies you read, they might just say lavender oil. They're not telling us the botanical species. They're not giving us an analysis of the oil or the country it's come from, the dose, so is it an undiluted? Is it diluted in something? Is it 10 drops? How big is a drop? All of these kinds of things that you start to sort of knuckle down and look at really closely. How long is the essential oil being administered for? So the example I gave before, they were inhaling it for 10 minutes in a room over 7 days. So that described what was happening. The dependent variable is the thing that's being measured. So that, as I said, is usually like stress, sleep, pain, physiological markers. There might be other things as well that samples are being taken. So now we want to prepare a strong hypothesis. I'll just go back to that slide. There we go. So things that were touched on already, so it has to be something that's testable. So we have to be able to test it in some way. It does need to be specific, grounded in literature. So you do need to have a look at the literature. What have other people been writing? Have there been people that have done similar studies? Is it falsifiable? So, could you make up these results? Is it clear and concise? So, to be a strong hypothesis, must be testable using available methods, should be specific about the variables and the population, grounded in prior research or theory. So, you might have a theoretical framework around it, and can it be proven wrong? So, that's the falsifiable. Could someone come along and prove it wrong in some way? Not that you want them to, but someone needs to basically be able to replicate your study to either verify it or to say, actually, no, you've made this up. So how do we get there? And for most aromatherapists who are interested in sort of dabbling in research, they notice something through their practice. They've identified either a problem or something's coming through that sort of think, hang on a minute, I'm getting a lot of patients or clients with this condition. I'd like to examine it in some more detail. You've had a look at a literature review. What have others found? What have they done? Have there been any solutions that have come up? Then you think about your independent and your dependent variables. What is it that you're wanting to try and change? And what intervention do you want to do to help change it? And what's the best way to answer the research question? Think about the practicalities, the cost, access to the population, and then confounding variables. They're the things that you can't control. And I know when I very first started my planning for my doctorate, where I looked at a gargle for radiation reactions in the mouth, I actually started my doctorate wanting to look at skin reactions from breast cancer. And that's what I was really interested in. And when I actually met with the radiation oncologists, they looked at me as if I was a bit mad. And they said, do you realise you'd need to have at least 600 women enrolled in a study to manage all the confounding variables to do with breasts? and and, um, and I hadn't thought about that. And I started Googling on my work. Well, it was just before Google came out, actually. I think it was Ask Jeeves or something like that. Started going on my work computer and put in terms like breast size and breast colour, and coming up with all sorts of dodgy sites. And the IT people at my work contacted me and said, what, you're having some very funny search things. I'm like, oh no, I'm looking at breast cancer research and I'm trying to understand the problem. Basically, these confounding variables that I'd have to consider was, breast size, cup size, the age of the person, the bra size, the type of bra they wore, their skin color, whole lots of confounding variables. And that's when they said to me, don't even think about breast cancer. Look at reactions in the mouth. And I think the IT department were quite relieved that I stopped looking up breast size and breast colour and things like that on a work computer. um, but practicalities, cost and access to the population. You can have a great idea, but what's it going to cost you to research this idea? How much time is it going to take? And even how are you going to go into a clinical environment and do some research? So this is a little hypothetical study that I've made up for the purposes of today. So what are the effects of inhaled essential oils on postoperative anxiety. So the null hypothesis, I've said that there would be no significant difference in anxiety between those who inhale essential oils and those who don't. The alternative hypothesis is that postoperative patients who inhale essential oils for 15 minutes after their surgery will have lowered anxiety using the state trait anxiety inventory compared to those who received a placebo inhalation. So we can already see in this hypothesis, it's telling us a lot of detail about this study just from that one sentence. So it's telling us that the population is postoperative patients, and it's a randomized controlled trial with two parallel groups, those who receive the intervention, which is lavender inhalation, and those who receive a placebo inhalation, which is an unscented carrier oil. The outcome is the anxiety, and it's been measured by a validated scale, the state trait anxiety scale, well-tested tool. The direction that it's going to go in is that I'm going to predict a decrease in anxiety in the intervention group. So I would do a power analysis before, which would tell me how many people, so it's a statistical calculation, and you can do it on Microsoft Excel, and it tells you how many people you need to have in a research group to determine an effect at 80% power and to have a probability of 0.05. So calculating this, I worked out that I needed 60 participants, 30 per group. So I'm needing 60 post-operative adult patients undergoing elective surgery in a hospital setting. You're always going to have some dropouts, so you might add a few more people on into that. Convenience sampling. So in a study like this, you'd basically take any patient that consented to be in your study, and then you do some sort of randomizing allocation. You might have a computer generated sequence, or you might just do something really simple like tossing a coin, or you might go, right, the first one goes in the control, the next one is in the intervention. As soon as you start to talk about that randomizing though, and then statisticians will think, is it truly random if you are allocating people to alternate groups as they come through, because on a particular day, all of the people that have surgery that day might be males of a certain age having a prostate procedure done. So they're already a different population to females that are coming in and having another sort of procedure. So you sort of have to think about who your population is quite carefully. So I've talked a bit about the null hypotheses and the statistics in a very, very brief way. And I must say, I'm not a statistician, so anytime I've had to do anything with statistics, I work with a statistician whose purpose in life is to make stats easy for researchers. But thinking about, again, what is it you're trying to measure, who your population is, and those outcome measures. And all of the things that we've said before are great. And a lot of the aromatherapy literature is around the statistical studies where people are comparing one group to another. But as I've said there, but, what about qualitative research? And I have to put this in here because a lot of aromatherapy research is qualitative research. And we don't tend to use hypotheses in the same way in qualitative studies because it's more exploratory and it aims to understand the experiences of people, their meanings and their perspectives, rather than to test a relationship statistically between things. but you can still have a qualitative research hypothesis or an assumption that guides your inquiry. And the language we tend to use around those is things like a proposition or an assumptive statement rather than a formal hypothesis. So, with qualitative research, there are perceptions, experiences, and meaning. So, the example I've got there, patients who experience post-operative anxiety perceive lavender aromatherapy as a calming and supportive intervention that enhances their sense of well-being. So we're not using a tool to measure that. It's like this is what the person says. Yes, I feel it's calming and supportive, or it helps my sense of well-being. So hopefully you can just sort of see a little subtle difference. You won't get statistics in qualitative research unless you're doing a mixed method study, which is where you have a bit of quant and a bit of qualitative. But what we're looking for is a pattern or a theme. So thematic analysis is something that is very, very popular in qualitative research. So we'll just have a look at that. With qualitative research, it's more about the experiences, as I said, of the participants, and sampling may be more purposive, which means I want to specifically interview women who have had breast cancer within the last 6 months and had a partial mastectomy, and you're only going to target those specific people rather than all women who have had breast cancer or surgery. Tends to be more descriptive. I mentioned thematic analysis before as a as a methodology that you when you get your transcripts of interviews, so it's usually interviews that you're going through and you're coding those interviews and then you're putting them together and looking for themes. So things might be, for example, sense of calm and control, emotional comfort, or association with healing and self-care. You don't know what your themes are going to be until you've gone through this analysis phase. So the data usually is collected by interviews when you're doing qualitative research. And there'd be questions like, tell me how you felt during the aromatherapy sessions, or what effects do you think aromatherapy had on your recovery? And the most common thematic analysis is Braun and Clark's 7-step reflexive analysis, which is used widely around the world. And I've actually just had a student who has just submitted his PhD this morning. And he did nothing to do with aromatherapy, but it was to do with health. He interviewed vegans and their perception of their vegan lifestyle on their health and well-being. So he did exactly this. He was interviewing, asking questions, and then he went through and thematically analysed all of the transcripts and came up with these different themes. So the common types of qualitative research that is used within health, but specifically also within aromatherapy. First one, this is a great word, I always manage to not say it quite right, phenomenology. And if you're like me, you immediately hear those little Muppets in your head going phenomena. Now you're all going to hear Muppets in your head, but phenomenology. So it's the lived experience. And that's used a lot, often with end of life patients, for example, talking about their experiences. What does it mean to have these experiences? How does aromatherapy help with whatever experiences they have? So it's really it's the person describing what's going on for them in their life. The next method of research is grounded theory. I've I've never done this or use this methodology. I've had some colleagues that have used it, and basically what you're doing is developing a theory based on experiences. So you're building a model of integrating aromatherapy into stress management, as an example. It's a quite a complex way of doing research, and you have to sort of go back many, many times to sort of test and develop things to sort of build this theory. One that's relatively common is ethnography, and that's looking at the study of cultural beliefs and values in a natural setting. And like, how is aromatherapy used within a traditional community, for example? Um, how might traditional practices incorporate aromatherapy or add aromatherapy to? But the part of doing ethnography is that it's in a natural setting. And it doesn't always have to relate to a specific culture of a person. It might be a culture of a place, um, like an ethnographic study of a hospice environment, for example. Now, the one that we would be all really, really familiar with is case studies. And we've probably all written them and submitted them as part of our courses and our training, may have had some published, and you're really diving deep into an in-depth analysis of a single case. Or you might have two or three or four case studies that you're analysing. Narrative inquiry has really become a very popular methodology in health, and where you're collecting personal stories to make meaning. So, for example, I've put there a narrative of a patient journey with chronic pain is a really good example. And then that last one there, the content or thematic analysis, which you can use in any of the others as well, but you might just be doing a content analysis of a whole lot of stuff, written stuff that's not necessarily interviews. So, what I have done here is just put together this little chart to summarize the different methods. So, phenomenology there, lived experiences. The strengths is it gives us that really deep understanding of personal experiences, but its weakness from a research point of view is small sample size and very subjective. Typical application in aromatherapy could be patients' experiences of aromatherapy during recovery from something. Grounded theory develops theory from your data. So you're generating new conceptual frameworks, but as I mentioned before, it's time consuming and it's that iterative data collection. So you're going over and over and over and over again, revisiting the same things. But an example would be how nurses integrate aromatherapy into stress management. So you might be going back and interviewing nurses over and over again. Ethnography. Okay, so cultural practices in natural settings, and its strength is that rich cultural context, giving a very holistic view. And I think a lot of aromatherapists sort of have an affinity to this kind of research approach. But if you are researching within a community type setting, it does require a long-term immersion. So you might have to be within that population or that community for a period of time. And there certainly are ethical challenges. So for example, I'm from New Zealand, so we have our Māori Indigenous population here. No one would go to a local community and just say, "Oh, I'm going to research. I want to ask you some questions now about how you use essential oils," for example. You have to spend a long time building a relationship, building trust, and working out those nuances within a community before you could go in and start to approach them about a research study. Case studies I mentioned before, so we're all pretty well familiar with that. Narrative inquiry, um, its advantage is it does get a lot of individual perspectives and emotions, but it may lack consistency and there may be an interpretation bias on behalf of the researcher. But patients' narratives of using aromatherapy for chronic pain, for example, would be a really good one. And the thematic analysis. So that's the looking for patterns and themes, really, really flexible. You can pretty much do any topic, and it is quite a systematic approach, but the coding process has to be really rigorous. So you're going over and over transcripts 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 times to look at your coding and to make sure that you're not being like too superficial to it. So it's an interesting process, but it's not easy. So the next sort of bit, I was trying to have a wee look at to try and find some studies that fit each of these methodologies. So good old Google. So this study was published in 2026. So aromatherapy experiences of intensive care nurses regarding sleep and fatigue, a phenomenological study. So they've actually put it in the title, which made it really easy for me when I was finding this. So we know the population, so it's intensive care nurses. We know the variables, so they're looking at sleep and fatigue. And then the aim in the research questions I thought was pretty well put together there. Um, the study aimed to identify characteristics and causes of fatigue and sleep problems. So they're looking at um, what are the problems? So what's their lived experience of those problems? And what do they do? What aromatherapy measures do they do to help with those problems? So they're not having an intervention. It's asking them about what are they already doing? What are their lived experiences with that? I couldn't find any recent grounded theory studies relating to aromatherapy. I found this one that looked really interesting about ethnography and the conflict between the beliefs of the healthcare providers and family caregivers in the use of traditional medicine and pediatric oncology, an ethnographic study. So it wasn't specifically aromatherapy, but it was sort of the closest thing I could get to that. And so the ethnographic perspective was people using traditional medicine in the pediatric oncology. And so it's looking at conflict between beliefs of healthcare providers and family caregivers. And it's actually looked a really interesting study. And you can see by the authors, I think it's in India, I think. And this person here, Motler, I think has written quite a few aromatherapy studies. And I found this one with a narrative inquiry. So again, thought this was really interesting. Enhancing well-being in beauty salons and spas through the integration of mindfulness and aromatherapy in beauty vocational education, a qualitative narrative inquiry. So this is 2023. And I thought, wow, that is a very interesting study. And so looking at mindfulness and aromatherapy into the curriculum to aid the educators and students' stress management and how can these practices, how does that impact on their personal and professional lives? So it's them um, using these strategies for their own well-being, not something that they're doing as an intervention for their own clients. And so interviews would have been conducted and then a thematic analysis of those interviews. So, two really, really clear research questions there. And how applicable is this? So, that's what they wanted to answer through their research questions. Yeah, I might have gone a bit fast. So, um, thank you. I might have gone a bit fast there, Denise, but is there any questions from people?
Carrie Ann has a question. Do you want
Yeah.
to unmute yourself and turn on your camera and ask?
Hi, you guys. I
Hi,
loved
Carrie Ann.
the last one you did that explained all the different ways to like the narrative, the ethno. I love
Oh,
that.
this
Yeah,
one here.
phenomenology.
Hmm.
That was fantastic. So I have a question about the co-founding factors, but before I forget it, how does it work with the narrative inquiry? I'm particularly asking sort of for the journal because sometimes people want to tell a story and then they want to say how they did something, but so it's technically they're it's hard because it's not really a case study, and I understand why they want to tell the story. So it looks like it might be better as a narrative inquiry written in that manner. And then if it's a narrative inquiry, would how much of the personal, like, I guess I'm a little confused. I'm trying to figure out like how to adapt some of this so that the story stays intact, but yet it's technically can't be a case study because it's too personal.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, Carrie, and thank you for asking that. As a way of looking at it, you sort of think like if you a case study is you as the therapist describing what you did, who a person through your treatment. So it might be over a number of times, but it's one person and it's your voice saying, I did this, I gave them this, I measured this on them, I responded, this is what they told me. So it's very much a you doing to the person. A narrative inquiry or a narrative approach is them telling you what matters to them. So you're asking questions, but with a narrative, and if I'm going to use my recent student as an example, he had no idea what people were going to tell him. So if you sort of think like case study, you tend to be asking quite specific questions. How long have you had this for? How does it affect you? They tend to be a bit more clinical focused. A narrative inquiry is you never ask a closed-ended question. It's always open-ended, and you'll draw more out. Like, how did that make you feel? Tell me what's going on
Okay.
for you, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
and you usually have a framework around it as well. There's a couple of, which I haven't mentioned in the presentation, there's a couple of theoretical frameworks that you might use. Reisman is one of the people. So your analysis of that information has a sort of a framework to it. Does that sort of
Yeah,
uh,
that is
explain?
actually fantastic because um I understand the case studies really well. I'm just try to make sense of like I understand that the people want to tell the personal story because it explains it, but if you look at it the way you're saying it, it's more almost like a psychology aspect of the situation. Is that kind of what you're like a social
Yeah, it,
psychology kind
it's,
of?
it would be because if you think you as a therapist, you might think, oh, I'm going to use this oil because it helps with sleep, for example. So you think I'm going to add lavender oil into this massage because we all know it helps with sleep. But the person talking about what that massage means to them, they may not even mention lavender oil or sleep. Like you're giving them freedom in a way to to give more meaning to their experience, and you're looking for more meaning in their words and and
Wow.
and putting some coding and things to that.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. I have another question, but I think Carmen wants to ask one. I don't want to take up everyone's time.
Hi, Carmen.
Don't worry. Go ahead. Your question.
Well, okay. I am, I thought I understood confounding variables, confounding factors. I thought I understood it, right? So in other words, you're saying So there's independent and dependent variables. So a dependent variable in your case would have been the size. Could you
Yeah.
say that because of a size, the person would be more likely to have, is that what you were saying?
With the breasts,
Right. So how,
yeah.
so
So
how did,
yeah, sorry,
yeah.
you carry on. Hmm.
So if I could say that that would be a dependent because that's part of that person's body, but it's not, it doesn't independently create a propensity to breast cancer because we need dependent and independent variables.
And
No?
then the confounding variables. Uh, so if you think purely research, so your independent is the thing that you're adding. That's the thing that you can control, how much you're adding, what you're adding. The
Okay.
dependent is what's being measured.
Okay.
So if we're looking at the breast cancer, I was looking at skin reactions. So that would have been the dependent variable in that situation. The confounding variables are all of the other things that I either would have had to control for or by increasing my sample size. And that would be like your breast size, your skin type, the
Okay.
skin color. And so then thinking from a research point of view, I would have had maybe a control group of women who were only 36B Caucasian woman aged between 25 and 30, for I don't know, for example, to sort of like narrow it down. If I wanted to put it across a whole population, I would have had to have all the different breast sizes, different ethnicities,
Exactly. Yeah.
ages and things. So then suddenly that's where the numbers, because you have to is the intervention, because what you're trying to say is if I was putting a product on the skin for the skin reaction, is the effect due to the product, or was it due to the fact that they were 32B bust size and Caucasian skin and aged under 30? So you've got to sort of factor all of that, and that became the too hard basket.
Okay.
That would be a multi-million-dollar multi-national study. That's why no one's done it, I think. Yeah. But does that explain that for you, Carrie Ann?
I think a little bit better. Yeah,
Yeah.
I understood it when I was in my master's program because this is something we had to focus on. And I'm studying now for an exam and I'm looking at it. I'm like, why don't I not know this? So I'm having to read to teach myself all over again, and I really want to understand it. So, but thank you for this has been amazing. I appreciate it.
Oh no, you're very welcome. I mean, a common like confounding variable, um, like someone might smoke, for example, or take some alcohol or something else, and they're like, yeah, they're really relaxed. And like in my own mouthwash one, I had one patient who was religiously following everything that he was asked to do, and then right at the end, he revealed to me that he was also taking honey for his sore throat. So I had to remove him from my study, which was a huge pain because he wasn't following the protocol, and the impact on that when you're a little researcher and I had 30 people and suddenly it was like 29, and I'm like, oh, okay, is my stats going to hold up? But yeah, so that was a confounding variable that he added into the mix. So, and Carmen, you question.
Thank you very much, Wendy.
You're
Um,
welcome.
First of all, thank you, Wendy, for the sharing. It's really impactful, and I learned a lot from this lesson. I have one question about this. Can we go back to the table with these six methods that
Yes.
behind it?
This one?
This yes. When we
Yeah.
come to this, right, different methods. Is it because can we use it as different for different cases? For example, like some case that is a rare rare case that is not happen to many people. Can we measure that by using just case study, but not like the rounded theory or the phenomenology, but like sleep is a very common issue, so we can use this method, right?
Yeah.
And we want to like write a research report and show how the effective is. For case study, because of the rare case, we cannot like search for another patients to compare it. So can we take this one case as a reference?
Yes, you can, and that's a really valid question as well. You if there is truly only one person, like if it's something so rare, it can't really be more than a case study. But that's not to diminish it as only being a case study, because you might go a bit deeper. Like you might actually use a phenomenological approach because you actually want to get more of the lived experience, and that's where you start to put a more of a theoretical framework around what does this experience or this condition mean for this person? How does it affect all of their life, not just one aspect of their life when they're coming for a treatment, for example? But if you've only got one or two people, it is really going to be a case study, but you can go a lot deeper. You can write 20, 30, 40,000 words on a single case study by the time you start to sort of look. And you might do a thematic analysis you might interview them over a period of time, for example. So you've got a number of interviews that you're doing with them over a time frame to see how does this affect them over a period of time, or with a number of interventions, and you're looking at thematic analysis of that, or you're going into the phenomenology and they're looking at their personal experiences. Does that's is that what you were meaning, Carmen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because in this few years, I've been looking at some cases because of my students. All right, I've been guided them for like how to treat for the sleeping patterns. There are many issues that are behind of these patients that cause the insomnia. All right, even though they apply the same formula, let's say same essential oil, but it might not be effective for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you right, you've got you're looking at one thing, so sleep or insomnia, so difficulty sleeping, but a number of people experiencing it differently or having different sleep experiences, and there's one protocol that's being used. Is that sort of what you're saying? So that's more than a case study. I mean, you could put a number of case studies together. You're almost starting to like you could use those people for a focus group, for example, and get them to and pick up some things from that, talking about their experiences of sleep and things. Problem with focus groups, which I haven't sort of mentioned here too much, is then people can be influenced. Like you might use a focus group to sort of get a sense of how big a problem is or what people might be doing for a problem. It would be more the start of your hypothesis development rather than the actual research methodology yourself. The narrative inquiry, actually, like if you were really interested in that insomnia and students and things, then you could start to sort of get some personal stories around insomnia. Is there common things that people are doing for their insomnia or common reasons? Is there something around age or gender, for example, that you're noticing because you're looking for that pattern or theme in your analysis?
Okay, thank you for that. And another one more last question.
You're welcome.
I have one student at the same time, she's my patient as well. It's a very rare case that I've seen. Her breast, I think it's on the right side of her breast, been infected and have a hole and a lot of discharge from I think for about like a year. She's
Wow.
seen the doctor, um, not only doctor, but a few like nutrition, whatever therapist she has tried for a year. Every day have this all this discharge, and the hole getting bigger and bigger.
Mm.
And she come to us. I guide her with some essential formula. Continuously been using for about like 3 4 months. Everything healed. Is healed.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just a simple way. Just to apply the oil surrounding
Mm.
the breast.
Yeah. So
Um,
that's a case study,
yeah.
and that's something that should be shared,
Um,
published.
the doctor
Do you
cannot
want to do
define.
it? We'll take it. We'll take it. We need a submission. Can you get it in 2 weeks? It
And she
would be
said
wonderful.
the doctor been using a lot of methods, but cannot
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something amazing.
Yeah.
I find.
And you
What
see
oils did you
that.
use?
Mm.
What oils?
I let me see. It's about like a year ago, so I have to check
Do you
back.
take photographs?
Yeah, she
Oh,
sent
this
to.
would be.
Let me show. Let me
Oh, you
check.
have to get her permission, and obviously it would be all anonymous, and you wouldn't be able to identify
This
her
one was.
and all of that kind of thing. But I think that, I mean, that that's inquiry. You're thinking. You've had this patient response, and this is how research starts for people, because he's like, the case study I often think is like the beginning point in aromatic research, because you've had this and you've said it's very, very rare, but that's going to trigger somewhere else. Someone think, oh, I had that as well. And maybe, someone thinks, well, hang on a minute, why does someone get this? Like, had she been breastfeeding? Had she had a wound, an injury? Had she knocked her breast? Was she, I mean, immediately you start to think, gosh, is it a sign of a tumor that she's had medical care? But I think that would be something I think would be fantastic to see published.
Mm-mm. Okay, wait. I found it. Can I share? This is what
Don't
she wrote to me. Um, she she summarized everything and she wrote to me because yeah, I want to know her condition. And she shared this. This is the case. Yeah, I got 2 holes. So this is a discharge. It's quite severe. It lasts for about a year. Just every
How
day like that.
distressing for a person. I mean, it'd have to be like something's a milk duct or something like that that's lost its integrity, through an infection or something.
And now it's totally healed.
Wow.
Now it's already out 1 year after,
Mm.
and no relapse. Yeah, it's really.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And what bar is that? Let me see. I have to check it. I should have right.
I would really encourage you, Carmen, to publish that. And I've just
This,
just seen in the chat here there is a mentoring program to publish a case study or guidance that's fantastic. And that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's supporting and growing therapists to be able to do things like this.
mm-mm.
Can I invite you to our mentoring series, Denise? Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Please,
Absolutely.
Carmen, please, can you come? We could
Uh,
have your article in the I do the intern for the journal right now.
Sure,
And
sure,
I was just working on a lot of the trying to figure out how much
sure.
we have. But this is very unique, exactly like Wendy said. And this is the thing with women. I have another article that I'm working on with lichen sclerosis. I've done so much research looking at this case study. A lot of people don't want to talk, women will not talk about anything to do with reproductive issues. They're very, this
Yeah.
woman particularly, it's going to be published, so it'll be seen. But it's possible that there's a lot of people who have this, exactly like Wendy said.
Yes.
And all
Correct.
the work that you did, she also had to trust you.
Mm.
And
Yes.
that's kind of scary, right? Because she's like, she might have thought, well, there's holes. What if it goes inside? And the fact that she trusted aromatherapy and that it worked, and it would be an amazing. So we have 4 weeks of it's a mentoring. There's 4 people, 4 or 5 people that will help you. It's free. You will attend every week. And the Gattafossi Foundation supports this. They're the one who funds it. And then once you get published, you'll be in the AIA journal, and it's just the beginning. It
Yeah.
would be amazing to have you contribute.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will join it.
Yeah, Carmen, I'm just going to chime in because Carrie Ann's right on. So I already had put in to email us if you had questions. I did put the form if you want to be part of the group case study series, which is 4 weeks, because it'll give you like all the information you need in order to publish in our journal, or if you have another journal, we just need their case study guidelines. And then also, you might want to submit it for our 2026 AIA conference because we are taking submissions for that as well for case studies and posters. So I've got all of the links in the chat. And again, mentoring is free, and watching these presentations is free. And if you sign up for the Research Academy, you'll get to hear about everything that's coming up. So any last questions?
That's all. Really wonderful sharing today with y'all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
And
you.
thank you both for your participate. I know this is being recorded. We've had a number of people who couldn't attend, but just really appreciate your questions. I think they're hugely valuable. And research is amazing. And I think you think it's easy until you actually start to do it. But once you do it, it's so rewarding. And
Yes.
everything
Yes.
starts with an idea and a thought. And the more that is being done to sort of support and generate knowledge, I think is just fantastic. So absolutely
Agreed.
go forth and research.
Right. So thank you so much for attending or for watching this presentation in the AIA Research Academy or on YouTube. And we hope to see you at the next presentation. And Wendy, thank you so much for sharing this comprehensive information. This was so much more than I expected. And thank you for sharing your experience. I think that really helps us to understand it better. So we really
Yes.
appreciate that.
You're welcome, and keep safe, everyone. Some of you I know are in warmer countries than me, and some are in colder countries. So enjoy.
Thank you, Wendy.
And nice to see you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Denise. Thank
Thank you,
you.
See
everyone.
you. Bye.
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 Good night. That wraps up today's session. Thanks for tuning into the AIA Research Academy. This academy exists thanks to the generous support of the Gattafossi Foundation and is here to make aromatherapy research fun, accessible, and relevant. Our mission is simple yet powerful: to educate, inspire, and connect a global community committed to advancing the science of aromatherapy. We envision a future where research is not just part of the conversation, but the culture. The best part, access is completely free. Simply sign up through the link in the description box below. And if you're an AIA member, the Academy is already part of your member benefits, putting powerful resources right at your fingertips. If you're passionate about deepening your understanding of aromatherapy through research, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay connected with our latest sessions. We appreciate your curiosity, your time, and your commitment to learning.